Okay, so we are very unusual at the University of Central Lancashire in that we place a lot of emphasis on the practical side of things. So an extreme example is that we have the only student-led, student-run publishing house in the world. It's called UCLan Publishing, and we genuinely do produce books with lots of collaboration, and we sell them on the open market. So we sell them to places like Waterstones and Amazon, and we are entirely self-sufficient. So if we don't make money on the books, then we don't get any more projects done. So these are a few examples of our books. This was our very first one. This is called Letters to Africa, and it was actually working with people in Kenya and Zambia, and we produced this book. This is still our bestseller, so you know why. We don't care, we just make money. But we did historical fiction with a famous author, Jane Johnson, who you might have heard of. And this one's about the Northern Lights. It's the only book published in the UK about the Aurora Borealis. So again, we sell lots of this. And this is our very latest one. More about that later. Okay. So I don't just have MA Publishing students here with me today. I also have MA Children's Illustration students and one MA Fine Arts student. So they're all going to talk about their practical projects and what they're doing this year, because whatever they're doing will turn into these in the future. Okay, I'll hand over to Louis and Laura.
I have to move this mic a bit because do I do it on the side first? No. Ah, there we go. I think that'll do. Right. Hi, I'm Louis, and my helps keep notes out, doesn't it? My project is called Letters Home. I'm working with Laura here, and basically, Letters Home, what it is, it's a local history of Preston told by through letters like this, local history of soldiers from Preston to the Somme, so about June 1916, told through letters like this and photographs as well. And so 1918 is actually quite an important year for this, because not only is it the centenary of the war's end, but it's also the last year that the British government will officially commemorate the war's end. So I think it's quite important that these stories are told and that they continue to get told as well. So yeah, as you can see, stuff like this is what we're looking at with the pictures. And, oh, actually as well, I'm going to attempt to play you one of the letters. Attempt being the key word.
It has been a miserable day today, and the mud is a foot deep in places. I shall have to close now, hoping to see your dear old face again soon. I am your loving George. P.S. I've heard we aren't moving until Thursday, but if we do move before then, our letters will find us.
So yeah, that's the kind of thing we're looking at with the letters. Interestingly, those recordings were done for an exhibition that the book is loosely based on. The exhibition is called Homing, and it's run by the Harris Museum. That's actually the Harris Museum pictured there in about 1914. That's when the local regiment was sort of gearing up to go out. So a bit more about this exhibition. Exhibition is called Homing, and basically what would happen is you'd get headphones, as you can see. They're using geolocation technology, and you'd go for a little walk. You'd go from this memorial here outside into the square to the cenotaph, which you'll see in a bit. And as you do so, you'd hear various kind of snippets of letters, white noise, static, and stuff like that. The idea is that you're experiencing, like, the idea of the exhibit is to show how kind of, trying to think of the words, not reliable communications were back then, as opposed to the kind of instant messaging, stuff like that we have today. So there's some more pictures of it. You get the idea. You go for a wander. You get the snippets. That's the Cenotaph Memorial outside that you get linked to back then and now as well. So in terms of our we've got a few sponsors, a few people helping us out. You can't do this thing alone. So first of all, most important one is the Harris Museum. That's the Harris Museum. That's in Preston. quite a nice building. They've given us the recordings that I've mentioned of the letters. They're also, I think, going to give us some pictures. And also, we also have gone to the Lancashire Infantry Museum as well. They're going to give us the transcripts. And in addition to that, the pictures, which have been throughout this PowerPoint that you've seen, are from the Preston Digital Archive as well. So, I'll hand you over to Laura.
Hello. Hi. So we were primarily thinking the target market for this book would be Key Stage 3 children, so from about like age 11 to 14. Mostly because this book would fit in really well with both the history curriculum, with how it looks at the First World War, and sort of first-hand experiences and stuff like that, as well as the English curriculum because of letter writing and sort of practicing doing that too. That being said, we don't want to make it too sort of patronising in terms of design because we think there is a lot of potential to appeal to sort of general readers of both sort of World War I history and want to hear like more first-hand experiences, as well as people who are interested in the local history of Preston and their kind of involvement in the First World War specifically. So in terms of the content for the book, we have access to about 8 soldiers' full correspondence over the 4 years. So that covers before the war when they were training and sort of getting together, during fighting and then potentially afterwards as well. Within those letters, they cover themes of death, love, communicating to and from home, their experiences fighting at the front. So although it is a very specific project that covers only a few sort of people's experiences, we think it has a lot of general appeal to really kind of connect with most of the country and anybody else who maybe had family sort of fighting abroad, that kind of thing. So that's going to be this sort of letter section. We were thinking as well as including a lot of pictures, particularly because the age group that we're targeting this book at, if they see a lot of dense, heavy text straight away, they are going to just turn off. And as we do have a lot of access to pictures through the Preston Digital Archive, we were hoping to kind of get pictures of the soldiers and maybe groups of them together so that they can really connect with the letters that they're reading and get like a first-hand experience of what they were doing and who they were. We're also going to potentially have a foreword right at the start of the book from somebody either from the Harris Museum who was involved in the project or the Lancashire Infantry Museum, as it would be a really good chance to kind of them to emphasise 2018 as a year of like 100 years since the First World War ended, but as well as it being the last time that it will be officially remembered by the government, as we think it's a really important thing. Sort of this book is kind of bringing to the forefront these soldiers' experiences and kind of what they went through. So I'm going to hand over to Imogen now.
Thanks, Laura and Louis. Good afternoon, my name's Imogen. For our MEDGE project, my colleague in Preston and I are working on the provisional title of Lancashire's Last Coal Mine. Now, as part of our research for this project, we actually went down the pit at the National Coal Mining Museum for England, and I can tell you that it's dark and dusty down there, and there's tunnels that are so tight that you've got to crawl through them on your hands and knees. All of this with the disconcerting knowledge that there's only a few metal and wooden poles keeping the ground up above your head. You can readily imagine that such an environment would have forged strong bonds amongst the many who work down there and their families. I don't know. This is a timeline just kind of summarising the decline of the British coal industry. Parkside Colliery in Warrington was the last remaining pit in Lancashire. Lancashire's in the northwest of England, in case you don't know. It was one of the most modern, profitable coal mines in the UK, employing nearly 800 people with 23 million tonnes of proven coal reserves. Despite this, in 1992, the British government identified Parkside as one of 31 pits to be closed. In protest at this controversial decision, 4 women from the group Women Against Pit Closure staged an underground sitting at Parkside several days before its closure in 1993. They remained underground for 5 whole days. Despite coal mining having quite a stereotypically macho image, women's activism did play a crucial role in the 1984-5 miners' strike and beyond. Women Against Pit Closures was originally formed as a support network during the strike, but became more politicised and actively involved in picketing. Through this, they provided education and new skills to women whose experience had previously been limited to the home. We envision the book to be a high-quality paperback consisting of photographs along with text and first-hand accounts from miners and pit kids. We're working with well-respected photographer Ian Beasley, who's provided us with photographic content. Ian specialises in social documentary and has been photographing England's coal mines since the 1980s. I'm sure you all agree with me that his images and the examples are both very evocative. As for the written elements of the book, we have access to a number of archives. These include the Working Class Movement Library in Salford, which holds the archives for the Lancashire branch of Women Against Pit Closures, and also the archives of the National Coal Mining Museum for England, with whom we are collaborating. They have also commissioned this project and will hopefully provide financial contribution to printing. We're also currently in negotiations to interview ex-miners and surviving women who protested at Parkside. This includes Anne Scargill, who was the then wife of the infamous National Union of Mine Workers President Arthur Scargill. If we do get to interview her, that would be a real coup for the book and a real kind of USP. As these people are all getting older, it may be our last opportunity to record their first-hand accounts of how their lives were shaped by coal mining and their fight to keep this once dominant industry alive. There's a generation of children growing up in the UK in ex-mining communities such as those in the Lancashire coalfield who have little or no knowledge of an industry that had a major impact on their communities, shaping it and eventually fragmenting it through the pit closures. In producing this book, we aim to create a record of coal mining in Lancashire as a lost industry that inspired fierce pride and loyalty and has left an indelible mark on the British psyche. Thank you for listening, and I'll now pass you across to Jordan.
Hi everyone, my name is Jodie. I'm currently working on a book about this football team, the Dick Cares Ladies Football Club. So, after joining the Dick Care and Co munitions factory in 1914 as part of the World War I war effort, a group of women started playing football in their breaks, just as a means of exercise and something to do. After beating teams of men who also played in the factory, they decided to form a football team in 1917, becoming one of the earliest known women's association football clubs in the country, the Dick Cares Ladies Football Club. Over the course of their 48-year existence, they were very successful, winning 758 of their 828 games they played. They went on to have a European and US tour, and some of their local matches in and around Preston were drawing up crowds of up to 50,000 people. Their popularity actually began to strip back of the male teams of the time, which was part of the reason why the FA went on to ban women's football in the UK from all FA-affiliated grounds and stadiums. The ban lasted for 50 years until it was repealed in 1971, which obviously is part of the reason why women's football is so much further behind the men's game today. So, about the book. We were originally envisioning something quite photography and fact-based, similar to what Imogen's doing on the last coal mine. But we realised there are already a couple of books in the market about the team that are similar to that. So we decided to go with a completely different approach. And we're now doing a children's book, 32 pages, because we felt the story had such a broad appeal and that a lot of people could be interested in this. And it could also be quite inspiring for young people, especially girls, who might be interested in football. So we're aiming it at children ages 8 to 11. Thematically, it's going to be focused on themes of equality and inclusiveness. We've got a couple of those interested illustrators at the moment. Here's an example of one of their work. That's one of the players, Jessie Walmsley, from one of the earlier teams. We felt that the themes would fit very well with it as possibly being a teaching aid. And it's also very timely in that the next Women's World Cup is next year in 2019. We're looking at working in association with UCLan Law School, who might be able to help us possibly get the book into local schools in the northwest of England, which would be great. And through them we may also be able to get funding from the FA and the UEFA, which would obviously be a great selling point of the book. This leads me on to collaborators. So we recently visited the National Football Museum in Manchester, who have a small collection of items relating to the team and also a wider collection of items to do with women's football generally. There are some people there who are very interested in supporting the book because it's such an interesting story. We've also got contacts at the Harris Museum and Art Gallery in Preston, who we've been working with. There's resources to do with the team in the Central Library in Manchester, also the Lancashire Archives in Preston. But we've just felt that this was a very original and empowering story, and it surprises us that more people didn't seem to know it. So hopefully we can be part of a way of changing that. Thank you for your time. I'll now hand over to Liz.
Thank you, Jodie. Hello, good afternoon. I'm Miss Kennedy, and I'm working with 3 other students from the MA Publishing course at UCLan, and we're working with Whittingham Lives project. The project was founded in January 2014 as a multi-arts project in order to recognise and celebrate the public service of Whittingham Asylum to its local community of Preston and the surrounding areas. They have partnered with Lancashire Care NHS Foundation Trust, Lancashire County Council Museums and Archive Service, Music in the Mind, UCLan Commensus, NWTUC, as well as various other artists, musicians and contributors who are all working on various aspects of the project. Whittingham Lives recently reached out to UCLan Publishing to assist with their project, providing them with a small, informative publication to explain the historical, cultural and social impact of Whittingham Asylum. The publication will be no longer than 30 pages and will include photography of the asylum throughout the years and imagery of archive records throughout. The written element will cover the political, social and economic impacts of Whittingham Asylum and other asylums like it in the UK, particularly looking at World War I and how it changed things for mental health, with shell-shocked soldiers returning home and their subsequent treatments. And we'll also explore general historical treatments such as electroshock therapy, using malaria to treat syphilis, and the use of sports and creativity such as music, art and writing. It will also look at the role of the Trade Union of Asylum Workers and why they were historically significant, not only to the running of these institutions, but campaigning for change within them. Finally, the legacy that Whittingham and other asylums have left behind and how they have shaped the way we view mental health today. Here is a brief example of some of the imagery that we will be using in the publication. Sorry. We'll be using some more photography of patients and workers, but right now Whittingham Lives are in talks with the Lancashire Archives to receive permissions to use specific images. The final product will serve as a free publication exclusive to the Whittingham Lives project, providing context to those in attendance to several events they are hosting, such as plays and musical performances. It is also intended for members of the general public, most likely those local to the Preston area, who have an interest in Whittingham Asylum or historical mental health institutions as a whole. While there are many publications on asylums like Whittingham and their treatment methods and the understanding of shell shock, what is interesting about this project is that its main focus is on one asylum, but also the perspective of the Trade Union of Asylum Workers, which is not commonly found within other publications of the same subject matter. Ultimately, this is what interested me in the project and is why I pushed for it at the acquisitions meeting we all had in December. Thank you for taking the time to listen to us this afternoon. I'd just like to introduce Abby to the stage.
Hi, I'm Abby, and I'm working with another student back in Preston on the MA Publishing course, and we're creating a children's non-fiction picture book that is currently got the working title The Size of Our Kingdom. Okay, so the book that we're creating, it's a creative non-fiction text. We're going to target children aged 8 to 12, It will include all these illustrations and some lesser known facts about each of the 50 animals that are featured. The content will be arranged in size order from the smallest known animal right up to the biggest. And the idea is to kind of build up the double page and fold out spreads of the biggest animals towards the end of the book. We also thought it could be a nice touch to include the scientific names of each animal, just because it is quite educational for this children's text. Although we are aiming this at a reader aged 12 and below, adult picture books are becoming more popular and are great for the gift market at the moment. So this text therefore needs to appeal to parents, maybe even grandparents, those that are holding the purse strings and might want to purchase it as a gift for children. So it's crucial that the book is marketed in the right way to attract these consumers and also excite the children that are going to be reading the content. So to compare this project to some other competitive texts, publications by Thames and Hudson are a really good example of what's existing on the market for non-fiction picture books at the moment. A couple of examples that sold really well were the Big Book of Bugs and the Big Book of Beasts, illustrated and written by Yuval Zommer. Between them, the two titles have sold almost 15,000 copies on Nielsen, so it's obviously a genre that is very popular at the moment. The Welcome to the Museum series by Big Picture Press is another good example of influences within this same genre that we were looking to draw upon. And they have a book on animals, plants, dinosaurs, etc. So they're obviously forming a series, which is also a potential possibility for this text as well. Okay, so for a book with such creative content, the marketing strategy needed to reflect this, we thought, so it needed to be quite consistent with the branding. And we've envisioned blowing up some of these beautiful illustrations and creating like attractive window displays and POS for retailers that could display them to potential buyers, themed by either animal class or habitat, like a social media or Twitter account to post unusual animal facts in the run-up to the publication, generate some interest and buzz, and obviously create some sales. We are collaborating with Lauren, who's produced all the artwork for the book. So Lauren's now going to do some talking about her work.
Hi, my name is Lauren Fitton. I'm an illustrator on the MA Children's Book Illustration course in Preston. The majority of my work is inspired by nature and animals, because I watch a lot of nature documentaries, so I read a lot about different species, and that's usually the beginning point for one of my books or some illustration. In 2016, I read a story about a polar bear called Victor, who was being transported from one city to another, when he was coming to the UK to be the UK's first polar bear in captivity. So this was the main inspiration for my book, which I called Going Home, which went on to win highly commended at the Pan Macmillan Prize. The story follows Victor as he gets washed overboard during transportation, and finds himself walking through a forest and finds himself at the North Pole, where he decides to stay and call it his home. And during the summer after graduation, I was drawing quite a lot of large animals. So I decided to challenge myself and draw a few smaller animals, which was the beginning point of my next book, which I called The Size of Our Kingdom, which shows 50 of my drawings of various animals going from the smallest to the largest, and a fact about each one so that children can draw comparisons between each of the animals. And at the moment, I'm working on a picture book called Every Whale. Which is a picture book where I'm showing the relationship between a young whale calf and its mother. As I'm trying to blur the lines between non-fiction and fiction picture books, because they're usually kept quite separate in the shots. And the story follows the first year of every humpback whale as it learns to survive because of its mum. Because I watch a lot of nature documentaries, I noticed that a lot of them tell the story of the entire species through a single animal or an animal family. So this book, it tells the story of every humpback whale and its mother, just through this one pair. In terms of my working process, the majority of my work is done using pencil, and then I scan in those drawings and use various textures and colours and paint markings, etc., and layer them on top. but depending on the tone of the book, the colour can change from one to the next. For example, with the size cut, with the various animals, I wanted it to have more of an encyclopedic feel. So I kept the paper and scans for the background and used all the colour for the actual animals. Whereas with Going Home and Every Whale, I kept the pencil drawing as it is and used the colour for the background and to give a more sense of place. But overall, colours are fairly new thing that I'm working on. So it's definitely something that I'll play around with a lot more in the future. Thank you, and I'll pass you on to Adelina Court.
Okay, hi, my name's Adelina Court, and obviously I'm on the MA Children's Book Illustration. My work's mainly informed by the fact that my background is in interior design and architectural design. So I used to be an interior designer, so therefore all my work kind of started out from being very architecturally, very spatially informed. Most of the stories that I started out with were because I just fancied giving illustrations. So I started out with setting myself some stories which I thought would be interesting to illustrate, just fictional characters based in kind of the area where I lived, just outside of Manchester, and some of them were just countryside, completely random spaces which existed or semi-existed somewhere. I did have some work published. One of them was a self-published book, so I kind of dipped into some children's book illustration, did some Lancashire Folk Tales, which was fiction. So it was sort of like adult reading, folk legends. And it kind of gave me an indication that I really like to do black and white visuals, because they're the sort of visuals that get consumed by adults, but they're possibly not advertised enough in the children's market. I feel like they're a bit understated and there's not enough attention being given to them because they seem to be perceived as an adult product. So I really fancied going into this. So my latest project, as a result, is a book which is fully black and white grayscale, called Songs of the City. It's Songs of the City because it's inspired by music. It kind of draws attention from bird song, something we don't really often hear in the city centres now. Nature, some of my background as having had grandparents from Eastern Europe. Bees, trails of birds, lots of kind of random semi-nature, semi-urban elements. So the story essentially follows the bird flying from various buildings in Manchester, buildings which are all familiar to me. Most of them are cultural buildings. You'll get buildings like the Central Library or jazz clubs, the Portico Library, the Urbis building, and the trail just follows the journey this songless bird searching for its own voice. And part of the story is like this because you don't hear some songbird very often in cities now. It becomes more of a kind of a side issue that we pay attention to. We think it's all cars and noise, and there's very little room for nature, there's very little room for bird song. So the story essentially follows the bird flying through the city. There's things like jazz music references, other animals, bare trees, industrial landscapes, all those references in there. And all the work is black and white. Like I said, most of my work now is created using very traditional, very simple, very primitive materials, pencil and pens and just a bit of ink here and there. And then lately I've added an Apple pencil to my arsenal as well, so I do digitise some of my work. And then I'll get it all in my sketchbook. I like to work on an A5 moleskin sketchbook because it's quite easy to work on. Put it all on an A3 paper if it needs drawing up quite sizably. So if it needs to be a big background, I like to draw that on A3, A2, even A1. And then all these drawings get scanned in and then edited on the iPad, which then gets put together in Photoshop and sometimes InDesign as well. I quite like working in InDesign with finished pieces. And it sort of reads like a graphic novel. There are big scenes. Oh, got a bit fast there. there are full spreads, but there's also little moments as well, which, like the ones on the left, they will have been drawn up on A2 and then shrunk back to A4 size. So yeah, pretty much it's all black and white. It's it follows the bird, and essentially the story ends with the bird finding its way all the way up to the top, the highest point of Manchester, and breaking into song. And that's where the song of the city is. So yeah, thank you very much. I'll hand over to Sam.
Hello, my name is Samantha. I'm on the MA Children's Book Illustration course also. So the book I'm currently working on is a picture book aimed at children between the ages of 3 and 5. So the story is called Little Boy Hunter, who is the main character, and he has been asked by his king to go out into the woods and look for the rare white doe, which is this mysterious creature that no one has ever seen or captured. But the joke of the story is that the deer is actually hidden in the background of every illustration for the child reader to find. So my main sources of inspiration, I'm really interested in, I'm really inspired by nature. I really love drawing animal characters. I really like drawing lots of trees. I love patterns as well, so there's lots of patterns that you can find in nature. And my second source of inspiration is history. And because my character was a hunter, I decided to set it in medieval times. And because of I had a background in animation, so using my knowledge of the multiplane camera, I've picked up on that method and tried to get the same sense of depth within my artwork by creating this this way of layering my work over the top of images behind to create a sense of depth. And the way that I work, I actually start off in Photoshop with my rough sketches because it just makes it really easy to change things and when I'm not happy with it. And it means I can experiment with colour really quickly. And once I'm happy with it, I actually print it off and then I lightbox it onto watercolour paper, and then I can finalise it in watercolour paint traditionally, and then it gets scanned back into Photoshop where I can add any extra, I can enhance some of the colours and add any extra shadows and highlights. And I'll hand you over to Janet.
Hello, I'm Janet Pickering. I'm a fine arts student. In a previous existence, I was a teacher, and here I am on my way to school. And during my career as a teacher, one of the things I really was interested in was hearing children read, sharing books with them, and it made me realise how important illustration is to children. If you're not yet a reader, it encourages you to want to read. In the first few years of reading, it enhances the text for you. And so I've tried in my work to cater for different age groups. My first commission was a private commission. It was a lady who wanted a book to celebrate her daughter's 40th birthday that her daughter could share with the grandchildren. So she said she wanted it very sharp lines, nothing scribbly, but nice and detailed so that the little ones would find lots to look at. So these are these pictures are about the adventures of a feisty little girl. So they're all about baby Kate. And that was aimed at a very young child. One of the things I remember from when I was teaching was that when children got older, they used to say, once you get good at reading, the pictures aren't very good. So that's something I've given thought to. And this is an experiment, really, in one of the types of drawings that might be suitable for an older age range, perhaps in a paperback book, just so that even though you're a good reader, you still have something to stimulate you visually. One of the projects I've worked on at university involved a trip to the Azores, which was wonderful, researching the life cycles of dolphins and contrasting the natural habitat of the dolphin with the very sterile existence within the Sea Life Centre. So this was remarkable. We got to observe the dolphins, go under the water and see them hunting. And the brief for this book was that they wanted the book to show the powerful beauty of nature and just how very different it was to the Sea Life Centre, where most children tend to see dolphins. Another trip was also to the Azores, and it was researching turtles and the effect of the pollution and the different actions of man upon turtles and their migration. And this was more of a non-fiction book. So although the illustrations had to be attractive, they had to be very accurate as well. Something isn't so much a commission, but something I do to help local charities is I produce colouring sheets just to help them raise funds. And this is the smallest English heritage listed property. This is a gatekeeper's lodge by the local abbey. So that's just to raise a little bit of money for them. In my own work for my fine art degree, I also have an illustrative technique. It's very much based on the Beano that I did read a lot of when I was little. And here you see a teacher trying to introduce children to the joys and delights of learning, despite the national curriculum, and overseen by the Minister of Education. A more recent project is a paperback book, and from the start this was very different. The students I was working with gave me a copy of the book, and I read it from cover to cover, and we decided that because none of us quite knew what style we're after, we would do some prototypes for one particular passage. So I'll just read the passage to you. He wasn't sure what happened next. One moment, her hand was no more than chill night air reaching to his body, and the next it was real, hard and cold and closing around his heart. There was a rush of sudden and unbearable pain and a lunging panic that opened his eyes and mouth as wide as they could go, and then everything had gone dark. So this was the first drawing we did. It was okay, but we didn't feel it was very scary, and we wanted to cater for a young adult audience, teenagers, very good readers, perhaps from 12 upwards. So we thought, what can we do to make it a bit more sinister? So attempt number 2, we tried this character. We thought that was a little bit nearer what we wanted, but not sinister enough. So the author, A.J. Hartley, helps us with this. And he mentioned the film Alien, where the most frightening bit is when you can't see all the monster. You just see little glimpses here and there. And he suggested, don't worry about detail, but aim for atmosphere. So the next attempt, we tried this, and we were happier with this. We thought this was much more spooky, and it was also a picture that an adult would find acceptable in the book, we thought. So that was the style we went with. And it's quite unusual in being an adult-style book, but actually one where there are occasional illustrations. So we tried to maintain that style throughout the book, and we were quite pleased with the end result. I'll just show you a few more, and then this is the end result, an actual real book that's been published, and you can buy it from the 15th of April. We're very pleased with it, and young adults that have read it have assured me it's well good. So that's good enough for me. So, should have a clip for you to see.
We're going to try and show you a trailer for it. This is great because it didn't work before. I can see it, you can't. Just oh, don't deceive me. Oh, that I need.